Back again. Another episode of a Muslim and an Atheist break bread. What you saying, Pops?
I'm good, man.
Me too, man. I'm good, you know. Everything's good at the minute, you know. Family's blessed. Everyone's nice. Busy. But, you know, doing what we love to do. So, we can't complain. I thought today, we touched on the last video we did, Delhi, the mega city. And it had a small part about Gandhi and Nehru, who was actually the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, when we're taught in school, were taught that Gandhi, or were led to the assumption that Gandhi run India. I think they leave it to that interpretation, because I can't ever actually remember being in school learning about the Prime Minister, Nehru, and then Gandhi. I remember learning a lot about Gandhi, and there was a lot of praise heaped upon Gandhi and how essentially he was seen as the saviour of India. I think that's how it's taught in British schools. So it'd be interesting to see, and I did ask this in the comments about Gandhi, and there were a few juxtaposition or opposing views on Gandhi in the comments. So I thought I'd do a video because someone suggested to do this video, and it's, was Gandhi really a Mahatma, or was he a British agent? Did he favour Britain over India? So I thought we'd start off with this today. Obviously, we're not going to unpeel Gandhi and know who he is off doing one 20-minute video, but we're just trying to broaden our understanding. I mean, what was you taught about Gandhi in school? Was that even a thing when you went to school, really? Because obviously partition would have been... No, you would have been at school when partition happened, and it just... So partition was what, 67, I believe?
So, I would have been in junior school, infants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mean. So, but, you know, when you got older, was it taught, like when you was at secondary school?
No, it's not taught, is it? These things are not taught. Anything like that, you just pick it up along the way. So in terms of the Gandhi phenomena...
Mm-hmm. Like, what was it like here at the time when this was going on? So obviously you would have been young, but I mean, after that...
It was a different community then. So there was no like that in terms of Asian versus Caribbean. We was the 80% Asian
What do you mean
community.
versus? I don't mean versus. I just
Numbers wise.
Okay, yeah.
You know, demographically, there was more Caribbean people here at the time than there were Indian people. But there were Indian people here. So we were the 80, they were the 20.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really...
Spoke about Gandhi, wasn't it?
Asian people were very meek and mild. Very unseen, you know. Shop owners, but not really integral in anything. It was a Caribbean community, predominantly, man. I saw the thing set. Little Jamaica.
That would have been your community, though. It must have been a little...
I don't know no next community, though, do I?
Well, this is what I'm asking you, innit? Like,
there wasn't an Asian community
really, but
at
even
that time.
within the black community, obviously having similar... Because whether you like it or not, you're going to have more in common with Asian people than you are English people. Because they would have come over. You would have had immigration in common. You would have had the fact that you're not white. You know, you're both brown skin.
I think...
Everyone's brown.
If I think about my mom's perspective, they were English when they got here. So
But
they
so
were
would
very...
have Indians been?
Absolutely. But I'm not in conflict with, you know, Indians. I'm just saying at that time they were a very quiet community. Mm-hmm. And we were a lot more vibrant.
Brash, yeah.
Because there was greater numbers in terms of how it is now. It's a complete flip, and we're very unseen in the community now, whereas it's predominantly an Asian community. Different groups, but predominantly Asian community now.
Yeah.
So, but at no point is Gandhi, like I said, taught or widely anything. You know, I don't even think it's widely discussed amongst Asians, to be honest. Partition happened and we learned about partition. So in terms of the premiership of India, that was never significant. So Nehru, we know about him. but partition is the thing that they
predominantly
have
teach
captured.
about.
Have captured the partition and the essence and the spirit of, you know, it's not who was running the country. That's not important.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So when we were in school, we were taught about partition, and it would have been Gandhi, and it would have just been like how Gandhi kind of led the way for partition to be happen, which, you know, there was never no implication of the British role in partition. It was just a case of Muslims, Hindus, and partition needed to happen. So, you know, Britain stepped in or whatever at the time and, you know, facilitated that. And Gandhi was the man who Gandhi was the man who facilitated that and kind of bridged the gap between both sides, which led to Indians' independence from the British. So, you know, it was almost a case of like, you know, the British wanted to give India back, so they just needed someone to step up and do that, from my recollection anyway.
Well, I think what you'll find is that the construct of the empire had changed at this point. So in terms of having direct rule over their colonies, now they were moving to indirect rule, which them call independence. So all the British colonies were given independence across that period, that 10-year period. So everybody never got it on the same day. Jamaica 62, somebody else Barbados 63. So as they rolled it out, like I said, and India in turn, when their time was, again, it was a part of that relinquishing the physical presence to administrative managerial role within all of these things. So them still run the country, but them not there running it. So them have a governor general, and other mechanisms. You know, Jamaican judicial system is still the British one. All decisions are made in Britain for Jamaica through the Privy Council, and I would assume that is across the board for all colonies, without actually having ever looked at it, but I would assume. So this is how it's
how it's run. Alright, so listen, we're going to jump into the video anyway. As I says, was Gandhi a British agent, or was he really?
This is the story of two men. One was American, the other was Indian. Both were lawyers, both were family men, both endured decades of struggle, both made immense sacrifices, both moved mountains to ascend to the pinnacle of national leadership. Both played a critical, pivotal role in shaping their nation's destiny. One came to be recognized as his nation's greatest president. The other went on to be revered as a saint, a Mahatma, the father of his nation. Both would eventually fall to an assassin's bullets. And as national leaders, they both found themselves staring at the same stark choice: partition or civil war. Who made the right choice? Was it Abraham Lincoln, who went to war when the southern states seceded from the United States of America over the issue of slavery? Or was it Mohandas Gandhi, who agreed to India's partition when faced with Muhammad Ali Jinnah's threat of a civil war that would pit Muslims against Hindus and Sikhs? Let's find out, starting with Abraham Lincoln's story. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809 in Kentucky, United States. In 1834, Lincoln was elected to the Illinois state legislature, where he gained a reputation as an eloquent speaker and a skilled debater. He was a strong advocate for individual rights, including the abolition of slavery. The central theme of Lincoln's political career and also his legacy was his fight against slavery. Slavery was practiced in North America right from the time of the European colonization of the Americas, which began in 1492. The first African slaves were transported to the British colonies in North America in the first quarter of the 17th century. In 1860, the total population of the US was approximately 31 million people. Of this total, only 500,000 were Native Americans and approximately 12 million were African origin slaves. Think about it. Almost 40% of the American population was enslaved. Slavery was central to the economy of the United States. Slavery allowed for the production of cash crops such as tobacco and rice and cotton, which were major exports and major sources of income for the United States. The labor of enslaved people was essential for the profitability of large-scale plantations, which were the backbone of the US economy, especially in the southern states. Slaves were also used for mining and construction and other forms of labor that were crucial for the growth of the US economy. The use of slaves in agriculture and industry allowed for the expansion of US territory and the development of new regions such as the Southwest. The wealth generated by slavery helped finance the American Revolution and other early national projects such as the construction of the Capitol and the White House. This exploitation of slaves contributed to the growth of the textile industry, as cotton produced by slaves was processed and manufactured into textiles. Now, in the 18th and 19th centuries, the northern states began to industrialize. This led to the development of labor-saving devices and technology and other innovations that reduced the need for manual labor, for slave labor. This gradually led to a shift towards wage labor and away from the use of enslaved labor in manufacturing. These northern states had a more developed transportation infrastructure, which made it easier to transport goods and people without relying on slave labor. The growth of wage labor in the northern states led to a greater demand for immigrants and free African Americans to work in factories and other industries. These northern states had a more diverse economy that was less reliant on cash crops such as cotton that required the use of slave labor. Because of these economic and technological factors, the northern states gradually began to abolish slavery during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. These northern states had a larger population than the southern states, which meant that they had more political power and could push for the abolition of slavery throughout the United States to the detriment of the less developed southern states. And Abraham Lincoln's election as president in 1890 sparked a crisis in the South. South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union. By January 1861, Mississippi and Florida and Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas had also seceded from the Union. By February that year, the Confederate States of America was formed with Jefferson Davis as its president. Soon, other states like Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee also seceded from the Union and joined the Confederacy. So Abraham Lincoln, the newly minted president of the United States, was left with two options: either accept the partition of the United States or go to war against the Confederacy. He chose war. The American Civil War began in April 1861. It was a brutal conflict, the most deadly conflict in US history until that point in time. Approximately 2% of the US population died in combat, and hundreds of thousands more died of disease. To make a long story short, the Civil War ended on April 9, 1865 with the surrender of the Confederate forces. Abraham Lincoln had succeeded in protecting the unity and territorial integrity of the United States. 6 days later, on April 14, 1865, Lincoln was assassinated by a Confederate sympathizer named John Wilkes Booth. Lincoln's legacy continues to be celebrated and studied today. His life and leadership continue to inspire Americans. He is widely regarded as one of America's greatest presidents, and his influence on American society and history and culture is immense. Now let's talk about Mohandas Gandhi. Mohandas Gandhi was born on October 2, 1869 in Porbandar, a coastal town in Gujarat, India. He was born into wealth and power. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was a chief minister of Porbandar and later became the Diwan or prime minister of the princely state of Rajkot. Mr. Gandhi's life and political career must be examined in the context of the British occupation of India. The British East India Company was founded in 1600 near the end of the Elizabethan era, and its purpose was to trade with India. At that time, India was incredibly prosperous. In fact, India was the world's largest economy for the best part of the past 2 millennia. The East India Company hoped to dip into some of this incredible wealth and enrich its stakeholders, its shareholders, and the English crown in the process. It succeeded beyond the wildest dreams of its shareholders. By the first quarter of the 19th century, the East India Company had defeated the immense Maratha Empire and seized control of large parts of India. It managed to survive India's first war of independence in 1857, after which the British Crown assumed direct control of India in the form of the British Raj. The British rule over India was brutal. The British killed roughly 10 million Indians in reprisals in the aftermath of 1857 itself, and they engineered countless artificial famines year after year after year, which killed well over 100 million Indians, and this ended with the Bengal famine of 1943. In the process, the East India Company and the British stole over $45 trillion worth of wealth and resources from India, reducing the world's richest civilization to rubble and dooming hundreds of millions to desperate poverty. It is in this context.
What do you think about that? Do you feel like, for things, I'm not us, like we should pay for it, but do you believe in things such as reparations? Do you think the things that were stolen from these continents years ago should be given back? Like the jewels that the Queen has and things like that. Do you think they should go back to their...
What do you think?
I think if things like if things taken have origins, so like let's say the jewels that the Queen has, and she has lots, by the way, from all over the world. It wasn't just Indian jewels that were taken or African diamonds. If they can be sourced from a particular place, then of course they should. It's a bit funny, isn't it? Like, it's like saying now, if I, and scaling it down, if I go and take someone or something, and then they go and tell the police, and the police go, okay, yeah, we'll look into it. They find the man and he's got my stuff. You can't claim like, yeah, it's mine, because he's had it for like half an hour or an hour. It's mine, isn't it? Still, it was mine and it was always mine. Even if it was my grandparents, if a man took my granddad's watch and then I found that man and he's got my granddad's watch, then surely I should be able to get that watch back. If it can be proved that it's my granddad's watch, isn't it? So yes, now, in deeper terms, when we're talking about reparations, is reparations money or is it access? Is it resources? Is it, better community living? Things like that. So where do those resources get pulled then, in essence? Because, we know that India was one of the richest countries in the world. Now, we have to consider that. Considering it was raped and pillaged to a point of nothing. I think it's the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world again today. So it's coming back and it's coming back strong. But should the British Americans were over there as well. I think the Portuguese were over there at some point. Should these countries have to face, whether it's trial, a judicial process to give back things that they've taken? I think so, yeah. How it's done.
I'm the descendant of a slave, so... What do you think I'm gonna say? Reparations. Of course, we should get reparations. It's not money. It's not land. It's a package of things, because it's about, it's about everything. And similarly, so should the Indians, in terms of caught with your hands in the cookie jar. you know, yeah, everything should go back because they know where it came from. They know where it came from. But the point is this.
It's just a bit brazen though, innit? That's what I feel. I feel like it's just brazen. Like, how can you rob things?
Well, they're saying forget about it, innit?
That's what I mean. Like, hey, it was in the past, man.
Where,
It was in the past.
yeah,
Don't worry about it.
Where
Forget
these
about it.
countries become bigger than Britain, they'll get their stuff back. But while Britain continues to portray this thing of being a superpower, then
Did you know,
they've
right?
got the big stick
There's
in
a
it.
there's a house, right, in I want to say Sussex. This could be wrong, but there's a house in Sussex, yeah, that's got more Indian artifacts in it. Yeah, it's got like, this is one of the founders of the East Indian Company, like one of the first people there. I can't remember his name. I think his name was Christopher something. For some reason, that name's sticking in my head. But the stuff he's got in that house, he's got like throne chairs, everything, like literally just sitting there in Sussex, and they know where it was taken from, they know when it was taken, how it was taken, you know, but it's just still there, and no one really feels to say, you know what, this stuff needs to be taken off this family, because obviously a family own it now, innit? But it's just weird, things like that weird to me. It's
The
just
time will
brazen.
come. The thing is, like I said, the stuff has no value.
Yeah, the stuff doesn't really have any
Right.
value.
So the resource things, gems, diamonds and stuff, it's kind of gone there. But in terms of, here's one that I took off you, you know, and it's the size of Africa, then I think it should be returned. But a lot of this presupposes that we're not still in the same time. We're still in the same time with the same people in control. You know, Africa's rising. Africa ain't got no army. So while that state exists, we can have as loud a voice as we want, but without an army, India's got an army.
Have they really though? Is it
Yeah,
like
they got nuclear bombs as well.
Yeah, they might have nukes, but have they got like boots on the ground? I mean, they've got the people to do it.
Well, they fight in China all the time, innit?
That's true. That's true.
They got an army, man. Africa
Is
ain't
it
got
well
no army.
equipped? Africa haven't got an army. Germany don't have an army either.
India's well equipped. They budget and spend on their army, but like the French army is predominantly Africans, so Africans make up other people's army,
What do you mean, like the football team?
just like football, you know, just like France.
So
not
that's
just
what
football,
I was going to
just
say,
like France.
just like France's football team.
Just like France is France, the whole country, everything is like that. There's a few French people, and then
Why
the
is it
rest
so
are,
much France though? Not like, because obviously Belgium was horrible in Africa, and it was my man's name, King Leopold.
yeah,
He was savage out there, man.
yeah, but
What?
they've took all that stuff off him. That's why they don't really talk about him. That's the shame. But equally, like I said, Gandhi was savage in Africa too.
Okay, well, we'll see, innit? We'll see about Gandhi.
We'll see if they talk about it.
Yeah.
Next, that we must examine Mr. Gandhi's life and career. Mr. Gandhi migrated to South Africa in 1893 to work as a lawyer for an Indian merchant in Pretoria. Indians naturally faced appalling discrimination in South Africa under British rule. In 1894, Mr. Gandhi formed the Natal Indian Congress to advocate for the rights of Indian immigrants in South Africa. He soon developed the concept of satyagraha, passive non-violent resistance, and used it to campaign for better treatment of Indians. In 1899, Mr. Gandhi sided with the British Empire during the Anglo-Boer War and formed the Natal Indian Ambulance Corps to provide medical assistance to wounded British soldiers. He even petitioned the British government to allow him and other Indians to fight for the British. Ashwin Desai and Ghulam Wahid's book, The South African Gandhi, Stretcher Bearer of Empire, shows that Mr. Gandhi demonstrated through his actions a strong loyalty to the British Empire. The book examines Mr. Gandhi's role as a stretcher bearer during the Anglo-Boer War and shows that his actions during the war were motivated more by his loyalty to the British Crown than by any sense of anti-imperialism or anti-racism. After the Anglo-Boer War, Mr. Gandhi continued to lead non-violent protests and civil disobedience campaigns in South Africa. His emphasis was always on passive resistance and non-violence. Mohandas Gandhi returned to India from South Africa in 1915 at the age of 46 as a celebrity. He immediately joined the Indian National Congress, which was created by the British bureaucrat Alan Hume in 1885. And Mr. Gandhi very rapidly became one of its most powerful leaders. Now, in 1906, the All India Muslim League was founded to represent the political interests of Indian Muslims. This was part of a long-running British policy of divide and rule, which sought to create internal divisions and tensions within India. In 1919, the Muslim League supported the Khilafat movement, which called for the Indian Muslim population to support the Ottoman Caliphate in Turkey and to protest against the British government's policies in Turkey. Clearly, this issue had nothing to do with India and India's freedom struggle. That same year, Mr. Gandhi endorsed the Khilafat movement and amplified the Khilafat leaders' views and ideology. By 1921, Mr. Gandhi had become the undisputed leader of the Indian National Congress. In 1922, the Khilafat movement's leaders criticized Mr. Gandhi for his commitment to non-violence and broke their ties with him. This movement, the Khilafat movement, fizzled out in 1924 when the Turkish dictator Mustafa Kemal Atatürk abolished the caliphate. And yet this Khilafat movement had a powerful cascading impact on the Indian freedom struggle. It became the catalyst for the demand for an Islamic Pakistan separate from India. In 1934, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, an erstwhile Indian nationalist who had opposed the formation of the Muslim League in 1906, returned to India after 14 years in the political wilderness. He set out to work for a separate homeland for India's Muslims. He set out to work towards partitioning India and creating a separate nation of Pakistan out of Indian territory. This also happened to be Britain's end game, their exit policy for India. Now, Mr. Gandhi was deeply opposed to India's partition. Mr. Gandhi said that India's partition would happen over his dead body, and he undertook several fasts to try and prevent the partition. And yet, India was partitioned on August 14, 1947, and received dominion status, not independence, on August 15, 1947. Mr. Gandhi then proceeded to coerce, arm twist, the Indian National Congress into appointing the unpopular Jawaharlal Nehru, who happened to be favored by the British, as India's first Prime Minister. On January 30, 1948, Mr. Gandhi was assassinated by Nathuram Godse. So now that we have examined and compared the careers and choices of Abraham Lincoln and Mohandas Gandhi, we must ask ourselves, who made the right choice? Was it Abraham Lincoln who went to war when the South seceded from the US over the issue of slavery? Or was it Mr. Gandhi who agreed to India's partition when faced with Muhammad Ali Jinnah's threats of a civil war, which would pit Muslims against non-Muslims? So here are the plain facts. After Mr. Lincoln's death, the United States went on to become a superpower. It is still the world's most prosperous and powerful nation. On the other hand, after Mr. Gandhi's death, India failed to live up to its immense potential in the 20th century. It remained an extremely poor nation with hundreds of millions of citizens suffering from crushing poverty. India is still a third world nation that is only now beginning to emerge as a major economic power in the third decade of the 21st century. It's taken that long. And what about Pakistan? Pakistan has forced India into 4 wars thus far. It has become the global epicenter of terrorism, and the civil war that Mr. Gandhi sought to avoid has taken on a nuclear dimension. So who made the right choice? Who set his nation on the path to success and prosperity? And who set his nation on the path to further ruin? I think it's pretty clear that Mr. Lincoln made the right choice, an extremely difficult choice, but the right choice nevertheless in the long run. So what could Mr. Gandhi have done differently? One way of answering this question is to ask ourselves, what would Abraham Lincoln have done if he were in Mr. Gandhi's position? Or what would the great statesman Vishnugupta Chanakya have done? Let's not forget that Chanakya defeated and dismantled the oppressive and immensely powerful Nanda Empire, which even Alexander could not conquer, and established the Mauryan Empire in its place. How would Chanakya have dealt with the British occupation and the prospect of India's partition? What would Genghis Khan have done if he were in Gandhi's place? What would Mustafa Kemal Ataturk have done? What would Joseph Stalin have done? What would Mao Zedong have done? All of these leaders faced almost impossible odds and succeeded. Their careers gave us viable models of what approaches could have been taken to liberate a unified India from British occupation. For instance, Mao Zedong, the Chinese dictator, would have opposed the British occupation in a very different way from Mr. Gandhi. He would have launched a guerrilla war against the British across the country. What did India have to lose? Anyway, the British had completely destroyed India economically. They had drained India of its immense wealth. They were killing hundreds of thousands of Indians every year, and life expectancy in India had fallen below 30. Can you imagine that? So India had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain, which is why a guerrilla war would make a lot of sense. So Mao would have led a nationwide sustained guerrilla campaign to demoralize and defeat the British forces. The military campaign would only end with the surrender or defeat of the British forces and the liberation of a unified India. That's what worked for Mao in China, and that's what he would have done in India. And we can very well imagine what Genghis Khan would have done to deal with the British if he were in Mr. Gandhi's place. It would be a campaign of all-out sustained violence until victory was achieved. But we know that Mr. Gandhi abhorred violence. So did Mr. Gandhi have any non-violent means of defeating the British? As it turns out, he did. We know that everyone in India revered and worshipped Mr. Gandhi. He was regarded as a great spiritual leader, a dharma guru. People were willing to give up their lives at his command, and lots of people actually did. So here is the critical question. Why did Mr. Gandhi never ask the British Indian Army to launch a satyagraha, a non-violent, non-cooperation movement against the British? The soldiers would have obeyed him. This is a guarantee. In fact, the British Indian Navy did precisely this in February 1946. They revolted peacefully against British rule, mostly peacefully, and stopped obeying orders. The British Empire lost control of the Indian Navy overnight. Over 20,000 sailors in 78 ships deployed across a vast area from the Persian Gulf to the Malacca Strait. Had the Indian Army come to know about the naval revolt and joined in the rebellion, the British Empire would have collapsed like a pack of cards. Why? Because the Indian armed forces, which Britain controlled, were the key to British rule in India. The British ruled India through force. Without that key, they could not rule. So the British Raj was on the brink of collapse and disintegration in February 1946. So what did Mr. Gandhi do? Mr. Gandhi nipped the rebellion in the bud by dispatching Mr. Patel to negotiate with the naval officers and make them surrender. Mr. Patel succeeded, and the rebellion was quashed after just 1 week. Had Mr. Gandhi supported a non-violent rebellion, a satyagraha by the Indian Navy and the armed forces, British rule in India would have ended overnight without any violence, and partition would not have happened. as simple as that. And communal violence could have been avoided by dealing robustly with the key politicians who sought to fan the flames of religious hatred, people like Jinnah and Suhrawardi and others. The Indian state apparatus was perfectly capable of dealing with such mischief mongers with an iron hand. So what does this tell us? It tells us that Mr. Gandhi could have ended British rule in India overnight and prevented India's partition all without any violence if he so wished. He chose not to. The essence of leadership is service, service of a finite constituency. For national leaders, that finite constituency is the nation and its people. True leaders do not rule, they serve the nation and its people. False leaders serve hidden interests. Who does Kim Jong-un serve in his capacity as the supreme leader of North Korea? Who did Dr. Manmohan Singh serve when he was India's prime minister? Who does the Pakistani prime minister serve? Does he serve the Pakistani nation and its people? Or does he serve the Pakistani army? And who does the Pakistani army serve? Does it serve the Pakistani nation and its people? Does the Pakistani army serve itself? Or does the Pakistani army serve external powers? Who did Abraham Lincoln serve? Who did Mohandas Gandhi serve? I leave the answers to you. Thank you for watching. Who set his nation on the path to further ruin? I think it's pretty clear that Mr. Lincoln made the right choice, an extremely difficult choice.
I was going to say, like, you could tell my man is definitely not a Gandhi sympathiser, is he?
Yeah, we weren't rich fast
but
enough.
The right choice, nevertheless, in the long run. So, what could Mr. Gandhi have done differently? One way of answering this question is to ask ourselves, what...
The difference here is that I think it's a bit of a weird thing to he's trying to basically use Abraham Lincoln as a measuring stick for what Gandhi done. Well, the two things were completely different. You know, I think the reasons why Lincoln and that went to war also weren't just because of slavery and independence, and it. So there was a lot to do with Britain and taxation in there with America, and I'm sure that was going on in India as well. Like, obviously the British were taxing India ridiculous amounts, and that was the whole point in Churchill and him trying to starve them out so they'd pay higher taxes. But the two things are very different. I feel like India and partition were at war with themselves, and hence it didn't really have anything to do with slavery, is what I'm trying to say. India didn't partition over a commodity, whereas America went to war for a commodity, which was human livestock. You know, that's a different thing completely.
No, I think America went to war for self-rule, innit? It wasn't so much because, you know, it was an extension of Britain, Oliver Cromwell type stuff, the Whigs and the Roundheads. That's just played out with, again, the hierarchy in America versus, you know, the Roundheads. So, yeah, they put all that stuff in there, but the slaves were never set free in America, you know, and the Civil Bill of Rights and everything, there's lots of things to say that wasn't actually about the black people.
That's what I'm trying to say, and it wasn't really...
India was a war about religion. You know, and yes, the seed was planted by the British because them divide and rule, and religion was the obvious thing because there was both groups existing alongside each other and had them petty differences. But obviously, wherever the British got them, look for the weakness and attack that spot. But essentially, India is like Northern Ireland, and Island.
Yes. There's
a strategic importance to the British, so them leave the people to fight it out for years.
That's a good yeah. So India is definitely more, I would say, akin to Northern Ireland than America. 100%, yeah. Or not Northern Ireland, Ireland than America, yeah.
Would Abraham Lincoln have done if he were in Mr. Gandhi's position? Or what would the great statesman Vishnugupta Chanakya have done? Let's not forget that Chanakya defeated and dismantled the oppressive and immensely powerful Nanda Empire, which even Alexander could not conquer, and established the Mauryan Empire in its place. How would Chanakya have dealt with the British occupation and the prospect of India's partition? What would Genghis Khan have done if he were in Gandhi's place? What would Mustafa Kemal Ataturk have done? What would Joseph Stalin have done? What would Mao Zedong have done? All of these leaders faced almost impossible odds and succeeded. Their careers gave us viable models of what approaches could have been taken to liberate a unified India from British occupation. For instance, Mao Zedong, the Chinese dictator, would have opposed the British occupation in a very different way from Mr. Gandhi. He would have launched a guerrilla war against the British across the country. What did India have to lose? Anyway, the British had completely destroyed India economically. They had drained India of its immense wealth. They were killing hundreds of thousands of Indians every year, and life expectancy in India had fallen below 30. Can you imagine that? So India had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain, which is why a guerrilla war would make a lot of sense. So Mao would have led a nationwide sustained guerrilla campaign to demoralize and defeat the British forces. The military campaign would only end with the surrender or defeat of the British forces and the liberation of a unified.
So they're not the way he's doing that now. He's like telling you what would have happened if someone else was in charge. You can't say that. So Mao would have been in charge right there. They definitely would have defeated the British. How can you even say that? Like Mao was a horrible guy as well. He was a dictator. Very, very horrible man. So it's a bit of a weird. Yeah, I think this guy's trying to prove his point, not in the right fashion, in my opinion. I get what you're trying to say. Was the peaceful route the right route to take? We'll touch on that after because I would like to see what you think about that.
I think
India.
We'll touch on it at the end.
China, and that's what he would have done in India. And we can very well imagine what Genghis Khan would have done to deal with the British if they were in Mr. Gandhi's place. It would be a campaign of all-out sustained violence until victory was achieved. But we know that Mr. Gandhi abhorred violence. So did Mr. Gandhi have any non-violent means of defeating the British? As it turns out, he did. We know that everyone in India revered and worshipped Mr. Gandhi. He was regarded as a great spiritual leader, a dharma guru. People were willing to give up their lives at his command, and lots of people actually did. So here is the critical question. Why did Mr. Gandhi never ask the British Indian Army to launch a satyagraha, a non-violent, non-cooperation movement against the British? The soldiers would have obeyed him. This is a guarantee. In fact, the British Indian Navy did precisely this in February 1946. They revolted peacefully against British rule, mostly peacefully, and stopped obeying orders. The British Empire lost control of the Indian Navy overnight. Over 20,000 sailors in 78 ships deployed across a vast area from the Persian Gulf to the Malacca Strait. Had the Indian Army come to know about the naval revolt and joined in the rebellion, the British Empire would have collapsed like a pack of cards. Why? Because the Indian armed forces, which Britain controlled, were the key to British rule in India. The British ruled India through force. Without that key, they could not rule. So the British Raj was on the brink of collapse and disintegration in February 1946. So what did Mr. Gandhi do? Mr. Gandhi nipped the rebellion in the bud by dispatching Mr. Patel to negotiate with the naval officers and make them surrender. Mr. Patel succeeded and the rebellion was quashed after just 1 week. Had Mr. Gandhi supported a non-violent rebellion, a satyagraha by the Indian Navy and the armed forces, British rule in India would have ended overnight without any violence, and partition would not have happened. As simple as that. And communal violence could have been avoided by dealing robustly with the key politicians who sought to fan the flames of religious hatred, people like Jinnah and Suhrawardi and others. The Indian state apparatus was perfectly capable of dealing with such mischief mongers with an iron hand. So, what does this tell us? It tells us that Mr. Gandhi could have ended British rule in India overnight and prevented India's partition all without any violence if he so wished. He chose not to. The essence of leadership is service, service of a finite constituency. For national leaders, that finite constituency is the nation and its people. True leaders do not rule, they serve the nation and its people. False leaders serve hidden interests. Who does Kim Jong-un serve in his capacity as the supreme leader of North Korea? Who did Dr. Manmohan Singh serve when he was India's prime minister? Who does the Pakistani prime minister serve? Does he serve the Pakistani nation and its people? Or does he serve the Pakistani army? And who does the Pakistani army serve? Does it serve the Pakistani nation and its people? Does the Pakistani army serve itself? Or does the Pakistani army serve external powers? Who did Abraham Lincoln serve? Who did Mohandas Gandhi serve? I leave the answers to you. Thank you for watching.
Wow. So, just quickly, what do you think on a peaceful means of revolution, I guess is the word I'm looking for?
What do I think on it?
Yeah, do you think that peaceful
No.
means really work? Like,
No.
do you think it was the peaceful way of Dr. Martin Luther King? Do you think it was a peaceful way of Mahatma Gandhi? Or, you know...
No, it's political, and like I say, if the oppressor's looking for a way out, and you present one, then they take it. But isn't it the notion of, like I said, so South Africa give them Mandela, everything came, Gandhi, again, a popular leader. You can find lots of things if you scrutinize it, but the media and the hype and the, let's put it this way. Your enemy doesn't make a hero, I say, unless you work for them. So anybody who you see them celebrating, you must know they must have been serving.
Yes.
They were either knights of the realm or some other honor, and this stuff, it goes on behind everything. All these leaders, when they go to the university and they get signed up, they have these things which do exist, and some of them, like I said, chivalry, that stuff still runs alongside real life. So we can never know, but to me, anybody celebrated gots to be.
What do you think to Gandhi then? Do you think he
used to kill black people in Africa? That's what I think about Gandhi. I don't think.
You think he was a British
more
agent?
than that. He was a British agent, most definitely. But he had his green card, so he used it.
But do you think, alright, so take the African aspect out of it. Do you think he was more for the British than his own people, the Indians?
Yeah, middle ground, innit? Like I said, he did non-violent things, which are all media-worthy things, and he was popular. He had a voice at the table with the rebels. So, even the Pakistan people who were breaking away, they were British, talking to the British. They were at the table. They weren't like, some separatists. The British managed both groups. So, to me, that's just Britain divides and rules, and then the police force and the army is them big stick.
Yeah. Okay, so that was Mahatma Gandhi. We've learned a bit more about Mahatma Gandhi. There's a few things in there that I didn't know, but most of it I knew, to be honest. I didn't actually know that he was in South Africa fighting with the British and Dutch against the Africans. Interesting. But yeah, okay, so that was Mahatma Gandhi. Was he a British agent? We out. Peace.
Peace.